American Airlines Flight 587 was a regularly scheduled international passenger flight from John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York City to Los Americanos International Airport in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic. And on November 12, 2001, the Airbus A300 plane flying the route crashed into the neighborhood of Belle Harbor on the Rockaway Peninsula of Queens, New York City, shortly after takeoff, killing all 251 passengers and 9 crew members aboard, as well as 5 people on the ground. The location of the accident, and it took place only 2 months after the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center in Manhattan and the Pentagon, initially spawned fears of another impending terrorist attack. But the National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, attributed the disaster to the first officer's overuse of rudder controls in response to wake turbulence from a preceding Japan Airlines Boeing 747 that just took off minutes before it. And according to the NTSB report, the aggressive use of the rudder controls by the first officer, the result of a flawed training scenario that over exaggerated the effects of wake turbulence, stressed the vertical stabilizer until the rudder was ripped from the aircraft. The airliner's 2 engines also separated from the aircraft before impact was due to the impending force. The NTSB cockpit voice recorder had survived, and also its voice recorder recorded the first 25 seconds, which was played in the report. And this is what was found on it.
Power, you all right? Yeah, I'm fine. Hang on to it. Hang on to it. Full power, please. I'm stuck in it. Get out of it. Get out of it.
The accident taxied to runway 31L behind a Japanese airline Boeing 747 preparing for takeoff. The United Airlines flight was cleared for takeoff at 9:11 a.m. Pretty much a coincidence, isn't it? It was on 9:11 a.m. that Tower Control cautioned 587 about potential wake turbulence from a preceding 757. Because the crash occurred just 2 months after the 9/11 attacks, Empire State Building, the headquarters of the United Nations, were evacuated. The Port Authority of New York and New Jersey closed all bridges and tunnels between Manhattan and New Jersey and suspended path service for a few hours. Traffic was disrupted, and there was less than a typical Monday because it was Veterans Day. The New York metropolitan area's 3 major airports in JFK, LaGuardia, and Newark remained closed for much of the day, leading to the cancellation
Normally,
of many
pilots
flights.
only move the rudder
Air
a
National
couple of
Guard fighter
degrees in
patrol
either
jets
direction to steer the
patrolled the
plane.
U.S. Airways after the crash.
Investigators wonder if the extreme
But
rudder movements
was
on
the
Flight
report
587 created the
point?
aerodynamic force
Was
needed
there
to tear the
indeed
stabilizer
a
off.
conspiration
You ready?
To find
involved
out, they create a
the crash?
computer simulation.
New Yorkers who believe they saw American Airlines Flight 587 explode in flames before its tail was even sheared off have accused crash investigators of ignoring the eyewitness accounts and prematurely ruling out a terrorist attack. 6 eyewitnesses, including a recently retired police lieutenant, an fire department New York deputy chief, and a former firefighter, have written to the National Transportation Safety Board demanding they be called to testify at a public hearing. One of those was Tom Lynch, a retired firefighter, who said that he had spoken to 16 other people who saw American Airlines 587 flying on fire before it crashed into the houses in Belle Harbor, Queens on November 12th. Lynch, who organized the letter, said he was standing on Rockaway Beach Boulevard when he saw a bright orange ball of flame streaming from the right side of the plane. 2 or 3 seconds later, he said he saw a large eruption of flames consuming the entire side of the plane's fuselage. The witnesses said they were surprised that the NTSB chairwoman, Marion Blakely, was able to say only hours after the crash that all indicators pointed to an accident rather than a terrorist attack. Blakely was quoted, quote, "I don't believe that this was indeed a terrorist attack on this plane. The NTSB report has indicated that they found malfunctions within the plane, end quote. However, Lynch fired back, quote, how could that statement be made while the flight data recorder had not been recovered? The crash investigative team had not yet showed up, and initial eyewitness reports including many accounts of one or two explosions in flight, end quote. Another eyewitness not involved with Lynch's group was Michael Benjamin. He said he saw a large orange fire engulfing the front third of the plane's right side while he was driving along Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn, along with his wife and two children. Benjamin, who works for the Oversight, Analysis, and Investigations Committee of the State Assembly, said he attempted to contact the NTSB and not received a return call. Preliminary reports written by the NTSB have not mentioned full flight or in-flight explosions, but have focused on turbulence, the composite materials used to build the jet's vertical tail, and sudden rudder movements as being the problem. An NTSB spokeswoman said more than 200 eyewitness accounts have been recorded and were being considered as part of the investigation, leading many to believe that a lot of these independent reports are not going to be reported in the report at all. And guess what? They were correct. More to the story. In May of 2002, a Kuwaiti national named Mohammed Jabara, a figure from Kuwait, convicted of terrorism-related offenses and linked to Al-Qaeda and its affiliate in Indonesia, Jemaah Islamiyah, had agreed to cooperate with investigations as part of a plea bargain. The question is, what was he willing to offer, and what did it have to do with American Airlines Flight 587? Well, among the details that Jabbar offered to authorities was a claim that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's lieutenant had told him that Richard Reed, the shoe bomber, and an individual named Abdul Rauf Jadeh had been enlisted by an Al Qaeda operative to execute identical shoe bombing plots as part of a second wave of attacks against the United States. According to the lieutenant, Jadeh's bomb had successfully destroyed Flight 587 while Richard Reed's attempt had been foiled. According to a Canadian government memorandum, Jadeh, a naturalized Canadian citizen, was to use his Canadian passport to board the flight, but American Airlines passenger manifest for Flight 587 did not list any passengers using Canadian passports. According to NTSB spokesman Ted Lopakowski, the weight of the memo's veracity was questioned, as no evidence of a terrorist traveling on board was found. The evidence suggested that the aircraft was destroyed after a piece of the tail assembly came off. But more on Jadeh. Abdul Rauf bin Habib bin Youssef Jadeh, also known as Farouk al-Tunisi or Al-Ruf al-Jidi, is a Canadian citizen who was found swearing to die as a martyr on a series of videotapes found in the rubble of Al-Qaeda's military commander Mohammed Atef's house in Afghanistan of 2002. Jadeh had moved to Canada using a false passport and seeking asylum. American authorities allege that he may have trained at West Amiak along hijackers Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf Hazmi in Afghanistan before being assigned to the second wave of attacks. A letter written by Saif al-Adil, the undeclared official emir who wrote the 33 Strategies of War, currently and later found by American forces, suggested that Jadeh may have originally been slated to participate in the September 11 attacks. Jadeh returned to Montreal in early of 2001 while Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was being harshly interrogated. He said that Jadeh had backed out of the plan, but according to a 2010 Harvard report on Al-Qaeda by a former CIA officer, Jadeh was detained in summer 2001 together with Zacharias Moussaoui, the alleged 20th hijacker. Moussaoui was carrying textbooks on crop dusting, while Jadeh was carrying textbooks on biology. Jadeh was evidently subsequently released, and in November of 2001, he left Canada several months after obtaining a replacement passport to one he received 2 years earlier, where he claimed to have lost. He is believed to be bound for Europe. Jadeh was also investigated by the 9/11 Commission report, and in it, it basically said that he withdrew from the first wave of attacks. And the 9/11 report was quite proficient in learning about Jade himself from investigators who wanted to know more.
He was actually boloed earlier than this most recent bolo. If you recall, back in maybe December of 2001, there were 5 martyrdom videos found in Afghanistan. Ramzi bin al-Shub was among those, as well as Abdurrahman Jade was another one of them. So he was actually on the radar prior to this stream of reporting about being involved in either the first part 9/11 or this perceived second wave, as KSM has referred to it. So I'm going to make that clear that he was actually boloed prior to this most recent bolo. As far as why he withdrew, I don't think we have information which would really come from intelligence sources. All we do know is there is a conflict about whether he was involved in the first operation or this perceived second wave operation, which, again, the degree of credibility to that statement is really single stream reporting. Nothing in our investigation in Moussaoui has uncovered any link to Jade. But there was one letter that was found during one raid in Karachi, Pakistan, potentially drafted by KSM, where it does include Jade referenced as Farouk al-Tunisi as being part of the first wave, and mentioned the same sentence as Khalid Midhar, Nawaf al-Hazmi, Hani Hanjour, Amar al-Shehi, and saying that he withdrew from that group. So again, you have to kind of take with a grain of salt the reporting, because there is a conflicting letter that's also out there, which clearly puts him in the first wave.
Fred Fielding had a follow-up question to the inquiry.
And there was also some evidence that the staff developed, I'm sure through some of your help, that he may have been selected for the plane operation, maybe even at the time the Hamburg group was assembled. And now he shows up, after he's withdrawn and kind of disappeared, he suddenly shows up again on the lookout list. And to the extent you can, I wonder if you would share with us, is there any information that's relevant to our probe that, or information that gave rise to him being on that list?
I could perhaps address that, and then whomever else, in terms of the selection of those, the 7 individuals for the be on the lookouts of BOLOs. 5 of them were assessed as having at one point expressed intent, as Jade did, to commit attacks against the U.S., either had language skills, aviation skills. Jade had Canadian connections that we were concerned about. He's somebody we don't know where he is, along with Al-Shukri Juma, Jafar the pilot, Jafar Dayer, other individuals who we are concerned about. And so the idea, I believe, behind the Attorney General and Director's press conference was to, again, remind the people that we have ongoing threat information. These are individuals that we assess as being a threat to the United States, and if anybody has any information, to provide that.
And Congressman Hamilton asked in the morning session about al-Qaeda capabilities. And one way to think about capabilities is, for a terrorist organization, is operatives. And there are operatives who we cannot account for, who have the skills that John was talking about. And we have threat information that talks about plots where those skills would be useful. And so not only do you have the intent, but you can look out there and say there are capabilities that al-Qaeda still has on the loose that they can marry up to these threats. And I think that's what drives our concern on the particular threat that we're facing in the coming months.
On May 26, 2004, Attorney General John Ashcroft and FBI Director Robert Mueller announced that reports indicated that Jade was one of 7 al-Qaeda members who were planning terrorist acts in the summer and fall of 2004. The other 6 was Shukr Jr., Adnan Shukr Jr., Ahmed Khalifan Galani, Fazul Abdullah Muhammad, Amir al-Mati, Afia Siddiqui, and Adam Yahya Gadin. American Democrats labeled the warning suspicious and said it was held solely to divert attention from President Bush's plummeting poll numbers and to push the failings of the invasion of Iraq on the front page. However, CSIS Director Reed Morton voiced similar concerns, saying it seemed more likely that election year politics than an actual threat. The New York Times also pointed out that one day before the announcement, they had been told by the Department of Homeland Security that there were no current risks. The day after the announcement, there was a reported sighting of Jade and Adnan Shukr Jr. at a Denny's restaurant in Colorado. The following year, another tip suggested that the pair had been seen driving a car with a Massachusetts license plate in Maine. Interesting to note that there were urban moving systems vans also in Massachusetts. In April of 2005, the U.S. State Department Rewards for Justice program offered a reward of up to $5 million for information leading to the capture of Jade. To this day, he's still out there. According to the official accident report, after all the days and weeks of inquiry and investigations, they reportedly moved the rudder from fully left to fully right. This caused increased side slip angles. The resulting hazardous side slip angle led to an extremely high aerodynamic load that separated the vertical stabilizer. If the first officer had stopped moving the rudder at any time before the vertical stabilizer failed, the aircraft would have levied out on its own and the accident could have been avoided. But what couldn't have been avoided was the following. In 2013, it was reported that 5 people suspected of planning suicide attacks had entered the African country of Uganda. One of them was reported to be Abdurrauf Jade. In the follow-up report, and reported by the Washington Post, Jade had an interest in re-entering the United States to finish off his idea of attacking from within the country. The man who sent them was none other than Saif al-Adil. Was this basically an act of human error regarding American Airlines Flight 87, or was it an act of terrorism covered up by the state and the FBI?